Hey guys, so for the first part of this video, I'm just going to go through the questions I set for homework on demand and supply. Okay, so Natural by Nature is an Irish company which sells bottled flavoured water with natural sugar-free ingredients. Using the information shown, draw the demand and supply curves for bottled water on the graph below. Okay, so we're going to use this graph here. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so that I can really get as much out of that graph as I possibly can. Okay, so first of all, I am going to draw my demand and supply axis, my quantity and price axis. So just there, note how I try to use as much of that box as possible. You want your graph to be good and big. The only thing I would say to you is that you need to make sure it's inside the boxes, because if in the event that your exam is corrected online, then those boxes actually allow the examiner to make sure that all your workings are between them. Okay, so if I look here, my prices go from 50 cent up to €3. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 prices. So if I look here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 boxes, 13, 14. Well, what I'll do is I'll do every 2 rows. I'll just take off my ruler function for a second. So every 2, so we'll say 0.5. We have 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. Okay, so 3. And just to save me having to write out the euro sign all the time, I'm just going to put that there. So 3, 2.5, 2, 1.5, 1 and 0.5. I don't even have to label in. You can, if you want, label in like 0.5 there. I'm just going to try and save us a little bit of time. Okay, and on the bottom we have, so if I look up here, my graph starts at 10,000 and goes up as far as 80,000. Now I have some figures here. I have like 37,500. So the best thing for me to do is to try and make sure that I kind of go up my boxes, that I'll have some boxes in the middle that will equate to some of these. So if I look at, I need, let's say 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, go up to 80, so 10 to 80. So I have 8 in total. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So what I could do there is 8 goes into 24 3 times. So every 3. So if I have 3, that'll be 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 and 80,000. And what I'll do is over here I'll put thousands. Okay, and then I can just do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 and 80. And then I'm going to start plotting them. So let's start with demand first. So at 50 cent I have 80,000. So I'm going to plot this in black. At €1 I have 65,000. So 65,000 is going to be roughly halfway between. So probably about there. Make my dot good and big. Then I have 150 is 50,000. So 150 is 50,000, roughly there. Then I have €2, 37,500. Okay, so in the middle here is roughly about 35,000, just here. So I'd say just about there would be my 37,500, and that's at €2. So here. And then we have 25,000 at 250. So 25,000 at 250 would be here. And then finally at €3 we have 10,000. So 10,000 at €3 is there. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to just join those points together. So draw a line straight through them with a ruler. And then, or if you find that it's a little bit crooked, don't use your ruler, and then just put demand there. I'm going to go ahead and draw the supply. You can come back, you can continue the video, or you can pause it and see how you got on. Okay, so just to quickly run through this, you'll see then I took these prices and I started plotting these supply on the supply curve. So 0.5 at 10,000, that's this here, 0.5, 10. Then I had 1 at 25,000, okay, so 1 at 25,000, and so on all the way up to €3 at 80,000. So there's your €3 at 80,000. And again, just draw a line through that. And that's your supply curve, okay? So that is your demand and supply, and that's all you had to do. If they then asked you for the equilibrium point, which is what we're going to do today, the equilibrium point will be this point here where they cross, and that would be at roughly 42,000, I'd say, 42,500. And then it would be just a little over €1.50, so probably 1.75. But we're going to talk about that today. Okay, so very quickly, just for those of you who might have missed class last day, the demand function we had talked about the last day, you don't need to know. I just use this kind of function as a mnemonic because each of these letters stand for part of the demand function that you need to know. We'll talk about the goods that do not obey the law, which obey and do not obey the law of demand later. We talked last day about the price of complementary goods and substitute goods. Just a little bit of a recap on this as well. We were looking at the demand function, and what we said was that when we see an increase in demand, so let me just make this a little bit smaller. When we see, so the demand curve itself looks like this. So we have the price and the quantity, and then we have a demand curve that's downward sloping like that. And what we said the last day was that when you see a price, let's say a price like so, P, and a quantity, what we are going to be examining in the next few slides is what happens, for example, if demand, the demand curve here, shifts to the left, that's D1. If it shifts to the left, we can see at that same price, we now have a massive increase in demand. So this one here is an increase in demand, and you'll often see me use these shorthands where I put an arrow like this. It's just, you don't use that in an exam. I just use it so that you're not going to be writing loads. Okay, so if we look then, the same demand curve, I just rub out this here, and we instead look at a shift downwards in demand. So we see that if it shifts downwards, it's going to shift to the left. Let's call this D2. And now you can see that price, at that exact same price, we have a lower quantity. So here we had an increase because it shifted to the right, and then here we have, this is a decrease, and we now have a lower quantity. So we said that this is POG, so the price of other goods. So substitute goods are goods that are like Coke and Pepsi, that could be, that people could feel that they're indifferent and therefore willing to substitute. If the price increases of Coke, then the quantity demanded will fall for Coke, because people will just switch to Pepsi because they feel that it's both the same. Okay. Complementary goods then are goods that are used in joint demand. The use of one involves the use of the other. Cars and petrol are a good example. I used golf and golf balls, hurleys and slitters as well, we were talking about the other day. So if the price increases of the more expensive good, for example here cars, then the quantity demanded will fall for petrol. Okay, if we said that the price of petrol increased, that's not going to change the demand for cars. People aren't going to start trying to put vegetable oil into their cars. Okay, so it really depends on the more expensive good, and if the price of that more expensive good goes up, then the quantity demanded will fall. We looked at income, and income we say is denoted by Y. Why we don't writing as I is because we talk about I in business as being the interest rate. So we have two types of goods. One is a normal good, and that's a positive income effect. And what that means is when income increases, you demand more of the good. So for example, if you have more income, you might decide to buy more food this week, or you might decide to go to a restaurant. If your income falls, then your quantity demanded falls as well. Inferior goods then are goods that have a negative income effect. So an increase in your income actually causes you to use less of it. So a good example here is pennies, because we would see, in some cases, we would see pennies as an inferior clothes. So if we even talk about, I have pennies versus River Island here, we gave an example the other day of pennies versus JD. So you've a pair of runners in JD that you really, really like. If your income increases, you're not going to buy the like cheap version in pennies. You will buy, you'll go to JD and buy your runners there. Similarly, if your income decreases, you're going to increase your quantity demanded of pennies clothes because that's all you can afford. Okay, the next one is consumer tastes, and you'll see in our function that's denoted by T. So if the movement in taste or preferences is in the favour of a good, it causes an increase in demand, which shifts the demand curve to the right. So you'll see an increase in demand. What do we mean when I say that? So let's take an example. AirPods. Okay, so everyone now wants AirPods because they are the new thing, the new technology. So when you see a movement in taste or preferences towards a good, then there's an increase. So if they move favourably towards the good, they'll increase demand for it. If it moves against the good, so say for example, a really good example of this would be the beer Corona. I don't know if you know this, but the beer Corona, and I'll just put beer there, actually saw a fall in sales at the very beginning of the pandemic, because obviously coronavirus, and some people seem to think that, I don't know whether it was that some people seem to think that they were going to get coronavirus from it, but they definitely moved their taste away from it. So that what happened there was the quantity demanded fell for it. Okay, the demand for a good depends on the expectations of consumers. In our function, what I had told you the last day is you can use that function as a mnemonic. It'll just help you remember the things that affect demand. So expectations, that's the E part of the function. Demand for good will shift to the right. So if it shifts to the right, we know that that's an increase in demand. So an increase in demand. If the price of the good X is to be higher in the future, so that means if people think that in the case of property or houses, that it's going to be higher in the future, they'll try and buy more now. If the good is going to be scarce in the future, for example oil, or if they think that their incomes are going to be higher in the future, they may spend that money now. When we look at the demand shifting to the left, which means a decrease in demand, the price of good X will be lower in the future. They think that there is going to be plentiful supply of the good in the future, so they don't bother buying it now, they wait until a later date. This one here, actually, the price of the good being lower in the future, that happens all the time. For example, if a consumer thinks there's going to be a sale in the future, they're going to hold off on buying a good now, and they'll just wait until it's on sale. Okay, and then finally, their incomes would be lower in the future. A good example there would be if they think they're going to lose their job. If they think, for example, normally in January their incomes are a bit lower, so they might spend less in December, or they spend less in January because they know that they have to wait for a couple of weeks to get paid. Okay, so that's expectations and how it affects demand. Okay, demand for good depends on government regulations. This is the one that is called G. Alright, if the government implements a program which reduces the consumption of a particular product, then the demand for this good will be affected. The smoking ban, you guys won't remember before in Ireland when smoking was allowed indoors, but a really good example here, if you even want to just cancel this out, Government regulations. Sugar tax is a good one, because the sugar tax has seen a decrease in demand for sugar foods. So like foods that have a high volume of sugar, people are buying less of them, and that's the whole point of that tax. You often see educational campaigns to reduce alcohol consumption, or what we know now is that there is a new law coming in where you can't use vouchers on alcohol, okay? And that's all going to cause the demand curve to shift downwards, and it's also going to shift to the left, okay? So when it shifts downwards, it means it shifts to the left. Decrease in demand. The idea of those regulations is to reduce people's consumption, okay? And we've talked a lot about economics, and how in economics it's all about how people behave. And this is the point. The government wanted us to behave in this manner, that we're consuming less sugar, we're consuming less alcohol. The smoking ban, the idea behind that was to try and get people to quit smoking. And the whole purpose of that is that it makes us a healthier population, but also puts a lot less pressure on our healthcare services that will have to deal with all of these issues. Another example there of one that's positive is a cycle to work scheme. The government introduced that a couple of years ago, where if you are working you can avail of a discount, and the cycle to work scheme is a discount on bikes. So you can ask, or you can look for a grant. Bicycles. You can ask for a grant, and they will reimburse you for whatever type of bike that you want, and that includes, you could even get like one of the really expensive racing bikes. I know plenty of people who have, and that shifts the demand curve to the right. It increases demand for them. Okay, and the final one then is unplanned factors. So unplanned factors, that's the U in our function. You guys should know this guy down here. He's the shopkeeper in Frozen. You will remember him. When Anna went in to get some winter clothing, he was like, "Yoo-hoo, big summer blowout." And the reason for that was because there was an unexpected freezer snowstorm as a result of Anna's sister Elsa freezing the whole of Arendelle. And that was an unplanned factor. So as a result, this caused the demand for winter clothes to increase, and boots to increase, and the demand for sun cream to decrease. So remember, he had all the summer stuff on. He loads of summer goods, but he had them all on sale. In Ireland, the coronavirus pandemic, again something that was completely an unplanned factor. The initial lockdown and the closure of schools resulted in a massive increase in the demand for toilet roll. So sometimes you see some particular goods just having a massive increase. Also around that time, you would have seen a huge increase in the demand for flour, because people were going to try and pass the day with baking. So that is all of our demand function covered now. In unplanned factors here, what will happen to demand for winter clothes and boots would be that the demand curve would shift to the right, and the demand for sun cream, the demand curve would shift to the left. It would decrease. Okay.